Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Circular Construction in Regenerative Cities, bridging the gap between theory, practice, and policy. Construction in cities already uses significant quantities of materials and generates substantial volumes of waste. In fact, in the UK, construction, demolition, and excavation account for 60% of all waste arisings. Not only that, there's, of course, a huge impact on carbon emissions. We've got growth in cities, and we've got a climate and an ecological crisis. So we urgently need solutions to decouple our growth from resource use. And that's what we'll be investigating and discussing today through the lens of circular construction. And we'll be looking at the opportunities that offers and the activities that are planned to help stimulate it, London, with our partners from the Horizon 2020 funded project, Circuit. My name's Alastair Mant, and I am Head of Business Transformation at UKGBC, the UK Green Building Council. Our mission is to radically improve the sustainability of the built environment, and resource use is a fundamental pillar of this. As part of our vision of a sustainable built environment, we're aiming to minimise waste and maximise resource efficiency. And as part of that, we've been running a circular economy programme for the last 2 years. Within that, we identified 5 circular economy principles for construction. We've published guidance on this and how-to guidance, specifically on reuse and products as a service. And just last week, we published our policy ask to government on how we can move towards a fully circular economy in regards to the built environment industry. All of that at ukgbc.org. And I'm delighted that we're also one of the partners on this exciting Circuit project, of which you'll hear more about shortly. And I'm joined today by 4 great speakers whose organisations are members of UKGBC, and more importantly for today, are all integral partners of the Circuit project. And there they all are. Hi, everyone. That's we've got Andrea Charlson from Elward. Maybe you can wave as I do this. Gilly Hobbs from BRE. There we go. Peter Childs from Imperial. And finally, the second Peter Swallow from Grimshaw. And we're going to have time for panel discussion with all of them later, for which we need your questions. So you're already on Twitter Live, so this should be pretty easy to get your questions in. Just direct them at Circuit H2020. Which, as you're already on Twitter Live, you will already know that that's the account for the Circuit project. That's Circuit H2020. And also use the hashtag CE Week London 2020. That's London with LDN. And that was on the slide earlier, and I'm sure it will come up again. So we want this to be interactive. Do please engage with us again across Twitter, and we'll have lots of time for Q&A after some of those presentations. And before you get to ask questions, we want to ask a couple of questions to you. So we're now going to be posting these again on Twitter. So you should see them come up below at Circuit 2020. And that's also how you respond to them. And then we'll look at those results a little bit later this morning. So question 1 is, which part of the sector are you in? So really helpful for us to know the audience we're speaking to and who's taking an interest. You'll be able to see the 4 options there: specification, delivery, other, or indeed number 4, not part of the built environment sector. So presumably just a slow morning, something interesting to watch with your breakfast perhaps. You've got a bit of time to answer that, and while you're doing that, we'll also bring up the second poll for you. We'd like to know how knowledgeable are you on circular construction. So no knowledge, some knowledge, or knowledgeable. We could have put super expert or something like that, but no, I'm sure no one wants to put their head on the block there in case we test them later. But I'm sure many of you are already knowledgeable, and so we'll have some excellent debate, Q&A later on. So we'll leave both of those polls going on for a little while. As you listen to our speakers, feel free both to answer those polls and also start posing some questions back to us, and we'll have about 15 minutes at the end from 9:30 roughly to put some of those questions to the four speakers. And I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker, to Andrea. She is a chartered environmentalist and chartered engineer, over 10 years experience in leading sustainability in the built environment, including embedding low carbon, circular thinking into the built environment. And as of just a couple of months ago, is the project manager for Horizon 2020 Circuit project. And that's what she's going to speak to you about now. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you, Alastair, and good morning. It's really exciting to see so many people logged on live early in the morning to hear us talk about circular construction. So that's really exciting. But just before I go into the detail of what the Circuit project is, which is the main thing I'm going to talk about, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and background into why we think circular construction is important at all. And it's basically because cities across the globe are experiencing massive growth. In London alone, the Draft London Plan has identified 48 opportunity areas. So these are strategic areas of land that are brownfield, which have a significant capacity for new housing, commercial or other development, and they are linked to potential improvements to public transport and other improvements as well. Across these 48 areas, there's a plan to provide just under 500,000 new homes and over 250,000 new jobs. So that's not going to happen with the existing infrastructure that we already have. We're going to need a lot of new construction to deliver those opportunity areas. In addition, the built environment in London already has quite a significant environmental impact. It consumes 400 million tonnes of materials annually, produces 54% of the capital's waste, and that's the largest contributor out of any of the waste streams. And by my estimates, is responsible for around 10% of consumption-based carbon emissions. So that's not insignificant on the scale of things. And it has been impossible to ignore over the past few years the growing interest and focus on the climate emergency, on climate change. This has been as apparent in London as it has been across the globe. We will probably all remember the protests that have happened, and following this, during 2019, 26 boroughs and the Mayor of London all passed climate emergency declarations and have been working out the strategies to deliver those since. And now, even more on topic, there are calls from a wide variety of sectors for a green recovery post-COVID, and with the aspiration and call from many areas to build back better. So we need to find solutions that allow cities like London to accommodate growth whilst also tackling the climate emergency. And circular construction is one of these solutions. It's not going to solve the picture by itself, but it's going to help. And so the basic premise of circular construction is that instead of starting from scratch every time a new development need is identified, using virgin materials and discarding anything that was previously in that location, we aim to close materials loops. We can do this in a variety of ways by reusing materials, sharing either the assets themselves or materials and components within those assets, leasing, repairing, refurbishing, upcycling, and as we often say when we're talking about circular economy principles, finally recycling. Recycling is our last resort in a circular economy world, whereas currently it's often seen as the best outcome that we're aspiring to. And we believe if we start each new development as an opportunity to really embrace circular construction techniques, we could dramatically reduce the carbon emissions associated with the growth of our city. Now, these are not new ideas. It's not brand new thinking. This has been going on for a number of years. I was researching these ideas when I was in university. And so there's been pockets of good practice and great exemplars both across London and across the globe. But the reality is that these are still the exception. They are not the norm. And if we really want to deliver that growth whilst minimising carbon emissions, like I was suggesting, we need to dramatically scale up the adoption of circular construction techniques. And it doesn't need to become the new norm. It needs to be embedded in city policy, and potentially national policy and global plans as well. And that is where the circuit project comes in. So I'm now just going to give a little bit of an overview of the circuit project. It is a 4-year Horizon 2020 funded project. And at the heart of it, the intention is to increase the uptake of circular construction and enable cities to initiate a circular transition. It's a collaborative project. It started around a year ago in mid-2019 with around 30 partners from across 4 cities in Europe. We have partners here in London, in Copenhagen, Hamburg, and the Helsinki region. And within those partners, we've got all different parts of the built environment value chain represented. In London, LWARB is coordinating the cluster of partners, and as Alastair mentioned, it's my role to kind of project manage the London part of the project. And our other partners are the UKGBC, BRE, Grimshaw Architects and Imperial College, who are all presenting later on in this session, along with the GLA, who will be presenting in one of the streams later on, and Clear Village, who are going to be leading the hackathon event this afternoon that some of you might be attending. So you see, it's quite a nice, diverse range of partners, and I think it's really a good team to have all those different parts of the built environment represented. And the project has really big ambitions. So the overall aim of the project is to increase the regenerative capacity of the 4 cities. And the 2 key measures that we are using for that is the aim to reduce the yearly consumption of virgin raw materials by 20%. That's associated with new build constructions, and to show cost savings of 15%, all of which will also result in waste reductions and fewer carbon emissions. The circuit project is going to focus, or is focusing already rather, on 3 specific aspects of circular construction. And these are urban mining, which is associated with making the most of the materials and components from existing assets that need to be demolished, transformation and life extension of existing buildings, and then finally, flexible design and design for disassembly, which is kind of looking forward, designing for the future to make both of those other 2 focus areas I've already described easier in the future. And my colleagues are going to go into more detail on each of these focus areas shortly, so I'm not going to dwell on this now. And then, so what we're doing in those focus areas is across the 4 cities, we are going to be looking to address some of the barriers and develop solutions in each of those focus areas. We're going to be doing 3 demonstrations for each topic in each city. So that's 36 in total. And this is all going to be supported by a stream of work looking at data. That stream of work is being led here in London by the BRE. So that's looking at both available data, what data we should be collecting, and also how to use that data better. And then this activity in the 3 focus areas is going to develop the insights and materials that we need to explore citywide systems, whether that's governance and planning systems, training and knowledge sharing, or data platforms. Just a little bit more detail on what I mean by those three things. So the examples of the governance and planning activities that we're going to be looking at are developing criteria for public procurement of circular construction, recommendations for urban planning policy, tools to collaborate with developers on implementing circular construction techniques, and roadmaps for each city. The training and knowledge sharing activities are going to be really wide and varied. This event today is part of that, so there will be further events and other hackathons throughout the rest of the project. We will be setting up a variety of networks. So some of these are going to be industry networks, and we'll also be having networks focused on policymakers within the 4 cities to share best practice. And also we're going to develop a network of city authorities outside of our 4 partner cities to help disseminate the findings further, and also to learn from other cities outside of our partners. There's a range of training activities going to be conducted. These will be towards the latter part of the programme, but we will have some e-learning modules created. There will be summer schools hosted at our 2 partner universities, so one of those being Imperial College, and there'll also be some in-person training sessions. And finally, talking about data platforms. So we will be producing a dashboard of city circularity indicators. So that's kind of feeding off that data stream that I already mentioned earlier. We will be developing a prototype for a materials exchange platform. We'll be looking at citizen engagement using the web services, but also using 3D technologies. And we will be producing a circularity wiki to bring together all the disparate parts of knowledge information related to circular construction in one place. So that's a really high overview of what we're going to be focusing on over the next 3 years. We are not going to be able to achieve this on our own. So that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to see so many of you here this morning. And we'd really like you to get involved. We think it's an exciting opportunity to make a step change both for our industry and also for the city. And we hope you want to come on this journey with us. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I hope there'll be lots of questions later. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrea. Clearly a big project with loads of stakeholders involved, lots going on. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you a question, but I am. So there's so much in there. What's the thing that you're most excited about over the next few years as you look across the breadth of the project?
Gosh, that is a difficult question because there is so much. I think one of the great parts about the European projects is that learning between different European partners. So I'm really excited to be learning from some of the great technical expertise that comes from the other cities. For example, some of our partners in Copenhagen really are at the forefront of this work. And also just at the kind of dissemination end, I'm actually quite excited personally about the wiki. I think if we can create a legacy of a resource for people across the built environment to make it easier to do these types of things, I'd be really proud of that.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to that journey over the next few years. And if you've got questions for Andrea and the other panelists, please send them in to @CircuitH2020 on Twitter. And right now, we are going to post another poll for you at the same place. So hopefully you've answered the first 2. And now it'd be good to know, what do we need to reduce most in the built environment in London? So you should be able to see that poll question. And there's the slide for it. So do we need to reduce most? Is it costs, waste, carbon emissions, or material use? And we might discuss that with the panelists later on. So I'm going to move us on now. We're going to have 3 short introductions to different aspects of circular construction through the lens of circuit. And first up is Gilly Hobbs. Gilly is a director in the Building Performance Group at BRE with over 24 years of experience in delivering tools and solutions for the built environment, specialising, of course, in the circular economy. And her role focuses on the development of high-profile, collaborative and innovative programmes in the UK, EU and internationally, which, of course, Circuit is an excellent example, but just one of many that she's worked on. So, Gilly, over to you to give us an introduction to the urban mining and reverse cycle.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So it's a very exciting project, the Circuit project. As Andrew was saying, BRE is also leading the work package in relation to data. So data standards, what data do we need across all of these aspects of circular economy in the built environment. And obviously that links in very well with the whole urban mining area as well. So when we talk about urban mining, I suppose, I've been, as previously said, I've been doing this sort of work for quite a few years. So I suppose in the past it's been called resource efficiency or recycling and reuse of demolition waste. So the urban mining is really about, optimizing the use of resources that are within the existing built environment, particularly when they start to come out of the built environment through either demolition or through refurbishment, the strip out of refurbishment. So the urban mining aspect of the Circuit project is really focused on that. So it's one of 3 areas that are really trying to do a practical transformation in terms of these 3 aspects of circular economy. And within each of the cities, there are these 3 demonstration projects within each of the 3 areas that we're going to talk about just now. So in terms of the urban mining, as I said, the focus is really on demolition. And one of the key aspects of, I don't know if we can go to the next slide. So the next slide gives a bit more detail about what sort of sits underneath that particular work package or aspect of work. So a really key aspect is pre-demolition audits. So we already do these pre-demolition audits across Europe. There's a mixture of voluntary and mandatory systems that are in place. In the UK, it's very much a voluntary process. But I think it's fair to say that everybody's doing it slightly differently, and also the actual process of doing the pre-demolition audit can be quite time-consuming, and there isn't necessarily any follow-up in terms of what actually happens post-demolition. So a key aspect is to sort of standardise that process. Look at there is an EU protocol on pre-demolition audits. So linking into that, what is our framework that we can harmonise, and the methodology that we can test out to actually make pre-demolition audits be this much more valuable tool in the process of circular economy. So within London, as with each of the cities, there are 2 demonstration projects. So anybody that's keen to volunteer projects, be really, really good to hear from you. And we're sort of trying out a combination of approaches, because the other thing that we're very keen to do, particularly in London, is to use a technology to make these audits not only quicker and easier to do, but then also the ability to transfer that information to make the calculations, for example, on environmental and economic cost-benefit analysis, to make that much easier. So just some of the things we're looking at are the use of scanning tools. So, can we do the survey sticks type approach to get a lot of the information in without having to manually input it from plans that may be decades old? What's the digital information that we can import, perhaps from information on typical building types? So if we have this database of existing information that we can import, then we could potentially speed up and make better decisions in terms of the ability, for example, to reverse some of the elements within the built environment reuse, ideally. And with that, then also comes the idea of greater or more robust testing and traceability. So from the pre-demolition, all the way through to where the products and materials may go back into the built environment. And then, as I alluded to, this sort of pre and post demolition comparison. So what we thought was going to happen, did that actually happen? And if it didn't, what were the barriers and challenges to actually be able to, maximize reuse, for example? And then also, can we link that, if we're able to standardize it, can we then link it into things like the material exchanges, the planning process, so that we can actually make more of this happen, this sort of mining from the existing built environment? So the second aspect is the use of the materials. So it's all very well to make the materials and products available from the demolition process, but if there isn't a market for it, then the whole sort of financial viability falls down at that point. So there's a further demonstration project that was really looking at how do we maximize and optimize the reuse and recycling of these materials back into construction, above and beyond, obviously, what is currently happening within the built environment. And there are some really key issues around, how do you demonstrate the quality? Is it through certification to link into fitness for purpose? Other routes that could be used. So, for example, the traceability of information from where the products and materials came from, that could help improving confidence in particularly in the reuse of some of these products. And in London, we are going to focus on reuse, but also obviously look at recycling. And we're looking at is our reuse focus going to be within the masonry, timber, or glass area? So again, any thoughts on that, and any volunteers to get involved would be very welcome. And then just lastly are the impacts of the urban mining. So we're very keen to make sure that we understand the environmental, economic and social costs and benefits of urban mining, so that we can actually help decision makers and help put the business case to moving into a much more transformative way of managing the resources in our existing built environment. So I think that's enough from me. I don't know if there are any questions. If you've got a difficult question for me, I'm hopefully ready to receive it. Thank you very much.
Hi, Jay. I think thank you very much. I'm just going to move us on, I think, time, but no doubt some of our attendees will have difficult questions for you. I can see from the poll results that over a third are architects, engineers and contractors, almost a third academics and NGOs, about 10% policy investor or developer, and indeed almost a third are not part of the built environment. So we have a mix of questions. Indeed, they all come with some knowledge, at least 80% of circular economy, and 20% would say that they're knowledgeable. So hopefully we'll have some time, we will have some time for Q&A. So I'll move us swiftly on to our next speaker, Professor Peter Childs. He is the professorial lead in engineering design and was the founding head of the Dyson School of Design Engineering at Imperial College London, and he is also the chair and founder director of QBot Limited. And he's going to give an introduction to the transformation and refurbishment focus areas. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Alastair. So good morning, everybody. It's great to be able to explore this subject with you. And I thought I would just tell you a little bit about some of my passions in this sector. I'm an enthusiast for retrofit, and here in the UK we have a great tradition of building archetypes. You look around and we have millions of terraced houses and a vast housing stock of detached and semi-detached homes from the 1920s and 1930s. And these homes can actually last hundreds of years. Some estimates for our terraced homes suggest that they could last 500 to 600 years. So to me, knocking something like that down could be classed as a crime against our environment when you consider all of the energy and effort associated with constructing those homes in the first place. But the challenge is how to make them fit for purpose for our use now, for all of our diverse needs, whether those are social or whether we're trying to make sure that the energy associated with those buildings is appropriate, or whether we're just trying to make them comfortable. All of us have probably had experiences of homes which are drafty and uncomfortable. And these are challenges that can be fixed. So in this work package, this presentation just shows some of the partners involved, and we've had some of them described earlier. We're really looking at extending the life of our buildings through transformation and refurbishment. And we've split up our work into a series of work packages, and we'll just go through each of these. So my next slide, please. And one of them is to identify target buildings and neighbourhoods for transformation. Can we pick upon neighbourhoods? Earlier on, Andrea showed some of the developments in London, looking at maybe homes or buildings for 500,000 people that could experience transformation. But how can we appropriately identify those neighbourhoods and do it in a way that is sympathetic to the existing residents and ensuring a solution that is going to last? It's so easy to talk about sustainability, but not deliver a sustainable solution that will last generations. So this is one of the areas we're looking at. Our next slide shows an input principally led by the architects within our team, looking at transformative design strategies. I am a professor, and of course I love definitions. For me, design is the transformation of an existing state into a preferred state. Now that's a very academic or generic definition, but design for me is about transformation. What is it now? And what could it be that we actually want? And that transformation is absolutely key in our thinking. And our next work package in the next slide is looking at assessment of design strategies and demonstration. I work in a design school or a design engineering school, and so much of what we do is through prototyping, and we use about 13 types of prototyping. And everybody's used to what designers do. We'll have our fancy computer-aided design model and maybe 3D print a form prototype, something that looks great. But to me in design engineering, and what we're doing in this series of projects, is really trying to demonstrate practically that things can work and that they will deliver a responsible solution that can be sustained through the generations. And this is absolutely key for me. We've talked this morning a little bit about interest in retrofit and perhaps realising the potential for the life of these buildings that we've already got through extended life interventions. Key to that is information and what I would call appropriate decision making. We have great data feeds. We can scan buildings. We can use feature recognition. We have lots of databases, but we're not very good at blending these data sources together and actually using that data that we have at the point of decision making and using it wisely. And this is something that we really need to work upon. And in my final slide, I just want to give you a little bit of an indication of some things that I'm practically engaged with. So as a professor, I love to talk about stuff, but as a design engineer, I love to do stuff as well. And I've had the privilege of working with a company called Qbot Limited. We make robots which go underneath homes and spray thermal insulation on the underside of your suspended timber or concrete flooring. And you can see one of those robots, the orange robot in the bottom of that slide. In order for us to do this, we needed really good robot vision and we needed really good surveying technology. And we've leveraged that surveying technology, and you can see some images on the left-hand side of your screens, which show some of the scans that we're now getting, scanning buildings from the inside or out, and developing our capability in feature recognition. Could we scan a surface and say what material it is, and then get that data feed in for a decision about whether that material could be safely used in some kind of future refurbishment, as Julie from the BRE was indicating. So an exciting project, and I'm really looking forward to this morning and the day with you, exploring the circular economy and the transformation of our society.
Thanks very much, Peter. And in interest of time, I will speed us on to Peter Swallow, who works at the Architects Grimshaw, currently engaged in R&D into material efficiency and circularity in the built environment, with a focus on design for off-site manufacturing, operational flexibility, adaptive reuse and construction. He's going to cover our final topic before the questions on flexible construction. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much. So at Grimshaw, obviously, this is a topic that has been at the sort of core of our DNA for over 40 years now. Design for disassembly and flexibility is something that has been embedded in almost all of our projects, going all the way back to the beginning of Nick's foundation of the company. And this particular work stream that we're looking at within the context of Circuit is looking at designing buildings based on flexible construction techniques, which they can easily do multiple purposes, which is leading towards extending their life cycles, all for disassembly and to facilitate the reuse of those materials, so it's easier to break those elements apart into their constituent parts. This is something we've had a lot of experience at Grimshaw, and it's something we've actually been at the sort of application end over the 40-year period of the company. So we've got a lot of in-house knowledge around how materials and how systems can be brought together in a clever way, in order to make sure that they're inherently able to facilitate disassembly at the end of life. The project itself, we're looking at a number of demonstrators to be rolled out through this work stream in order to demonstrate design for disassembly and flexibility. And this is all leading towards facilitating the uptake of these practices. And this focus area will demonstrate a number of full-size modular and adaptable building systems. So we're looking for partners across London to support this and to help us identify demonstrators within specific boroughs within London and working with specific developers. So if anybody is interested in being involved, we'd very much like to hear from you. We have a primer that we've developed that gives a little bit more detail about this work package and what the deliverables are that we're trying to achieve here. So as I said, these systems will be based on design for disassembly and flexible construction principles, with an aim to easily enable alterations to happen during the life of the building, which can fit the changing needs of tenants without having to have major construction intervention. The idea is we're trying to facilitate easy adaptation that can be done at the user level ultimately, or with very little intervention from specialist help. The solutions will be developed, as I said, using existing products and methods to showcase feasibility of circular building concepts. And this will be done through 12 demonstrators split across the 4 cities. So we're looking to do 3 in the UK. The other element of this is we're also looking to form an urban decision-making forum. And this will be a collection of partners from across the 4 city regions, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Helsinki region and London. And the idea of the forum is to look at close collaboration between the strategic stakeholders that have been brought together in the forum, and really looking at identifying barriers that we can looking at barriers and accelerators for implementing circular economy principles, particularly around flexible construction, and provide recommendations for the demonstrator projects whilst they're being identified and whilst their briefs are being formulated. And then developing circular building roadmaps. And this is the third part of this work stream, is looking at then creating a roadmap that allows cities and partners within those cities to identify specific projects and whether they're suitable for implementing flexible construction, and how we then adopt the principles that need to be embedded into the design of the buildings in order to facilitate that at the city level and collaborating with local authorities. That's essentially an overview in a nutshell of what we're trying to achieve through this work stream. As I said, Grimshaw, we've had a lot of experience with sort of practical implementation of disassembly and flexibility through a lot of our projects. I'll be presenting later today on a specific project, which is in the Miller building in Bath, which we did all the way back in 1976, and we actually implemented some of these principles all the way back almost 30 years ago in that project. So we're now starting to see how that plays out in terms of adapting that project to become a new facility, which will be the Bath Spa University's School of Art and Design, and that project has just completed last year. And I'll be giving an overview of some of the lessons learned in terms of some of the things we tried to implement 30 years ago with the technology of the day, and how that's actually borne out in the reuse of the building and extending its life. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. So we have questions coming in, and also we've got the results of the last poll. So in terms of what do we need to reduce most in the built environment in London, nobody says costs, which I'm a bit surprised about. And we've got a third each for waste, carbon emissions, and material use. So my first question to the panelists, if one of them would like to respond to that result. Anyone as surprised as I am about reduction of costs, especially in the economic situation that we're going into now, post-COVID?
Yeah, I'm
surprised.
Surprised.
Yeah, I mean, maybe our audience are all tuned in to our circular construction agenda, but I'm surprised costs hasn't got more votes so far.
And anyone else want to say what they think is should be reduced most out of those four? Cost, waste, carbon emissions, and materials.
Can I maybe just make a pitch to suggest that you could do all of them potentially through circular economy? And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to demonstrate in the circuit project and other activities, is that, it doesn't necessarily entail extra costs, that you can actually reduce carbon emissions and material resources. So, it could be a win-win-win-win situation. I think that's where the demonstration projects are really critical, because we'll be getting actual real-time information from real construction or real projects to show that where you can make these savings. And obviously not everything's going to be rosy in the garden. There will be some trade-offs. I think that's where the link into things like the planning, aspects about planning and policy development are really critical, because if we really want to drive some of these activities, if there is additional cost or if there are other challenges that make it difficult to realise, then that's potentially where the work in policy development and supporting it through the planning process could be quite valuable. And I'm sure the circular economy statement and the work with GLA and London on that is very relevant to that whole area as well. And so we're working very closely to sort of try to bring all these things together to make it, the best choice and the best decision, so you don't necessarily have to think, oh well, if I do this, it's the right thing from carbon or materials, but it's going to cost me more. So we've got a way to go, but I think doing the very practical demonstrations should help show the way much more clearly.
Thanks, Gilly. And to build on that, there's actually a question that's come in around, in terms of clients seeing this often as more costly, sometimes the services and the material. Maybe one here for the Peters, if I can call you that together, is what should we consider trying to engage with and getting buy-in from clients and consumers to support circular construction, in lieu of not having that policy basis perhaps there that Gilly has spoken about, and the thought of it costs more? What angle can we take?
I'll kick off and then maybe hand over to the architect to put me right. Gilly's noted that we got so much potential and we could have win-win scenarios. but we're finding that the built environment is what we call a distributed decision-making scenario. There are so many people who make part of a decision, and I think it's important that we challenge each other at that decision-making point, because otherwise we'll have unintended consequences, and the decisions we make and the buildings we end up with won't be as good as we might hope. And any of us who've lived or worked through a building project will know that scenario, that you don't quite get what you want. So I'll hand over to Peter, because he will have exact examples of this.
Thank you, Peter. So I absolutely agree with what Peter said there. I think when you are working with multi-headed stakeholder clients, it is very hard to get the essence of what's been briefed, even when there's good intentions at the outset of a project, to see that through to absolute sort of fruition and delivery within a project. And it's very sort of essential that we make sure that those things are codified first and foremost into a brief, but also then that they're accountable to people, and we make sure that the responsibility lies with the people that are ultimately delivering the scheme. But it is a challenge, and I think it's something you always have to make sure that you can, where there isn't policy that's specifically guiding you, that you make sure that the team collectively is holding themselves up to account, and making sure that they can be reflective at the right moments within a project to make sure that you are sticking to what you've agreed, but also being cognizant of there are factors like the capex of a project, which is going to limit some of your decision making. But making sure that you've got an accountable decision making process is also very valuable. So making you can go back and you can evaluate some of the decisions you've made, and where you might have challenges that arise in a project, making sure you've got a robust process evaluating where you might have to change or deviate from some of the things that you've set in motion. So I think that's from my sort of recent experience, that's something that's certainly put projects in good stead when we've had those processes in place.
Thanks, Peter. And final question because of time, and I'm actually going to put this to Andrea, knowing your background, and it's around a lot of focus on buildings. Is there opportunity to apply circular construction principles to other kinds of infrastructure, such as road and energy, and perhaps even rail, I might add? So a quick answer from you on that. Is it able to apply to those?
Yes, I mean, the quick answer is definitely yes. I think with all of these different types of projects, there are the different key drivers. So different parts of the circular construction world will be more applicable to infrastructure. Things are probably less likely to be kind of reused at a component level, perhaps in infrastructure. But topics such as keeping the assets in use for as long as possible through refurbishment and transformation is very, very relevant to infrastructure, as is the the urban mining kind of things. So yeah, making the best use of your potential waste streams, all very, very relevant to infrastructure. And yes, as you know, something I was trying to push whilst I was at HS2.
Thank you. And our principles for circular construction, we believe, although focused on buildings, can certainly be put to good use on infrastructure. So thank you very much to the panelists and the speakers. There might be some more questions we can answer through Twitter directly. And there is a final poll question coming up there as well. Which construction approach could have the most impact in making London more circular? Please find that on the Twitter poll. And the agenda for the rest of the event, we've got 3 streams coming up the next couple of hours: urban mining, transformation, policy, and metrics. And if you've pre-registered, you'll have the links for those already. If you've just joined us live here on Twitter, then look out for the links posted below, and there should still be space to join many of those. They all have some excellent speakers involved in circuit and beyond, and we'll all be interactive, especially at 11 a.m. at the workshops. I will be back at midday and delighted to say that I'll be joined by Sunan Prasad, who has an absolute wealth of experience in putting circular economy principles into practice through his work as an architect, and he will be giving a keynote and we'll be having a bit of a chat. So thank you for joining us for this first session. Rest your eyes, stretch your legs for 10 minutes, and then please join my colleagues at 10 to carry on the conversation. Goodbye from me until midday. Thank you.